iPhone then does an HTTP, well, it ups that interface, and it's on a completely separate AT&T network. It's on a different IP range, and your iPhone actually talks to a Lucent Alcatel visual voicemail switch. Does some crypto stuff, some authentication things, and it downloads your visual voicemail. So at any time, you could have up to 3 different networks bridged on your iPhone when you're receiving visual voicemail. And if you're curious, if you were to intentionally put something on that APN and try to route across it, you can't really go far. I'm just saying. You know, it's what we do, right? PDP IP2, I'm not really sure. I've never seen it up. I don't know what that does. PDP IP3, the third internal interface, that's used with tethering. So anytime that you tether your iPhone, even though you're not supposed to, that is what you would use. It runs a little DHCP server to give your Mac or your PC or whatever an IP address. So for the purposes of this talk, we're going to focus on PDP IP0. And you can see that AT&T has assigned that interface the IP of 1069.62.220. That is the NATed IP that you would live on when you're behind AT&T's cellular IP, 3G, Edge, whatever network. So a little note here, in July 2007, the iPhone dev community figured out that the root password on everybody's iPhone is Alpine. And we all got a big kick out of it, and you're like, oh, stupid users, they should change all their passwords, blah, blah, blah. And so I started looking around to see, well, exactly how is this manifested in the real world? How many people are exploiting this, or how many people really know what to do when everybody has the same password? And the only thing that I could really find was some mailing list chatter. There was a school admin who was saying that kids on the dorm networks, they were rooting people's iPhones over the wireless network, which is a kind of a contained issue, right? It isn't some widespread problem. Well, so big deal. You're at a hacker convention with your stupid default root password, and people root your iPhone, and it affects just people at the convention. Well, what I found in about May timeframe of last year is that AT&T did not filter IP to IP traffic on their network, behind their NATed network. So when you're on AT&T's network and you think, well, I just have my little phone, whether it's the cheapy little free phone with your little WAP browser, or if it's your BlackBerry, or if it's your laptop Connect card, or any of these 3G services, your Kindle, whatever you have, you think, well, it's just me connected to the internet. What I found was it's actually a lot like this. I found multiple /16, multiple Class B networks that I could see from my iPhone or from my wireless card inside of their NATed network. So there's a lot of stuff out there. So your smartphone, your laptop, your BlackBerry, your Windows smartphone, PDA, whatever, has been on one giant flat network with everybody else. I'm going to talk about some of the things that I saw out there. So you can kind of just see everybody. If you use some SNMP tools, you can see a lot more, but not anymore because I fixed everything. So I started looking around, and I conducted 52 scans. And I should say 52 scans using Nmap that actually saved the data for, so I could process it later on, looking for 4 known ports. The reason why I was looking for 4 known ports is because has anybody ever done port scanning over a cellular network? Probably maybe fooled around a little bit. It's not exactly like plugging into a Gigi T5 and just letting it rip, right? It's a little higher latency. Average, you're looking at 200 to 300 milliseconds pinging times, so it's fairly slow. So in order to quickly identify devices that I could see, I was only looking for 4 known ports. I would also conduct port scans of entire Class Bs and /24s, and what I would do is basically fire up Nmap, put my phone on my nightstand, go to bed, and see what I got the next morning because it would take that long. And sometimes it wouldn't finish, so I had incomplete data. But I had 52 total complete scans. Now, one thing to note about port scanning from your iPhone. I could have, I guess, popped my SIM card out, put it in my old Air card, slapped it in my laptop, and just done it that way. Your iPhone gets very, very, very hot when it's slinging out that many packets. Now, that isn't my iPhone, but it's an awesome conference slide, right? I fire up a Nmap, lay it on my nightstand, and my wife would pick up my phone. She's like, why is your phone so hot? I'm like, it's busy. When the cellular network's going and the CPU's going, it's not exactly the use case that Jobs and the gang probably thought of when they threw it out there. But I kind of thought that there was something cool about doing all these scans from my iPhone. So what did I find? I technically found 10,589 some odd IP addresses up, so something that responded to the initial ping sweep. If any of you have ever done really large scans, Class Bs or anything bigger, you know that you kind of got to do an initial ping sweep. Well, that's what I did. So about 10,000 devices responded in some way, and of those devices, I found that 83 were running SSH. 24 were running port 80, and again, this is all on AT&T's NATed IP network. When you go to DEF CON or you go to Shmoocon, you're like, well, I'm not getting on that terrible, dirty network, I'm just going to use my air card. Well, it's not, or it used to not be 100% safe. Yeah, people had web servers running out there. Who knows what they were? Maybe they were ATMs. I don't know. When I would go back later after I was reviewing the data, a lot of times these devices were no longer there. So it isn't like an ongoing pinned IP. I also found 4 people that happen to be running PDA-NAT. How many of you guys know what PDA-NAT is? It's a little tethering app. It uses some proxy technology. It's an open proxy. So when you run it on your iPhone, I could actually proxy through your iPhone on the NATed network and then out of there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then I found 3,644 phones listening on port 62078, which that's the default port that non-jailbroken iPhones listen on, which is kind of odd that they bind it to the PDP interfaces. That should really only be bound to the loopback interface. And that port goes wild when you sync with iTunes. And if you Google around a little bit about that port, you'll find some USB muck stuff that some of the iPhone dev folks have been working on. And what I tinkered with for a while was trying to see if I could just sync people's music libraries over the cellular network using that port by piping TCP via USB mucks. But yeah, that didn't work out so well. But it's interesting that they're tying it to all of the network interfaces. So maybe we'll see iTunes sync over the network soon. Another thing to note about port 22, when you jailbreak your iPhone and you initially connect to port 22, there's about a 30-second delay while the iPhone initially makes its SSH key. So you'll establish the three-way handshake and you won't get a banner for about 30 seconds later. And what that tells me is that's an iPhone that has never been SSH'd into before. And what I found was, well, I never found an iPhone that gave me the SSH banner right away. And what that indicates to me is that all the iPhones that I saw and that I examined had never been logged into. So when you jailbreak your iPhone, there's a city of stuff. It gives you 3 choices, like a developer, hacker, whatever. Most people probably chose hacker because it sounds so awesome. And they install SSH and they never logged into it. Chances are they probably also didn't change their password. The other kind of interesting thing there is because it wouldn't respond right away, I may have lost some of the data, and map timed out. I don't know. So. Other stuff that I saw out there in the weird private NAT network is I saw a Linux box running SSHD. So it's probably somebody tethered their laptop with one of these little air cards and they were running SSH. I saw a ton of Windows mobile devices, Blackberries, Windows PCs. Now, while I was only looking for those 4 ports, when I was doing some of my initial probes and saying, wow, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff out there, I would find some devices that had no ports open. And I'm like, yeah, right. It's responding with resets on every single port. It must be something. So I would just do OS fingerprinting, and it came back as a Windows PC that somebody had tethered. Now, so it looks like AT&T probably figured it out from the cable modem companies. We should probably filter port 445 and 139. And that's something that people do on a lot of networks anyways, hotspots and stuff. So it was somewhat filtered, but I guess that they didn't factor a ton of jailbroken phones being out there. And PDA-NAT for the iPhone is an open proxy. So this is my web browser tethered to my iPhone. And I was in Europe using my friend's foreign plan when I did that, not here in AT&T. This is somebody else's PDA-NAT running on their iPhone, and if you set your proxy to use their iPhone IP, you technically surf out through their iPhone and then out of AT&T's network. So it's just like this bizarre little weird shadow network. So that's all well and good, and you guys have probably seen some media reports about this, and you can hack iPhones. And so my colleague Nate and I only ever looked at Nate's iPhone, I didn't look at anyone else's. Nate's iPhone, I found, well, I could SSH it. So I called Nate up and I said, hey, give me your AT&T IP, shut off your